We're recording.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Carrie Mocyk, and I'm one of the instructional designers on campus working with Theresa Gilliard-Cook and Douglas Hemphill. We are now in session 404 for those who haven't been part of the other sessions. In the first session, we talked about how anyone who knows me knows I use the phrase control your chaos all the time. I'll explain more about that in a moment. The sessions that we've covered so far was the first one, what's in it for me? And it talked about what do you gain from making changes to your course to better control your chaos. The second session was about information overload. And in this session, we discussed some ideas to consider to streamline communication. Yesterday, we talked about let's being real with our students, and that was about offering flexibility in your course. And today is making connections. The session goals, we want to have a discussion about who the students may have a discussion about who the students are and what they may want from your course. And we'll discuss different ways to you can humanize your course, the importance of adding instructor voice, and offering supportive evidence on why relevance is so important to your course. We will also provide some easy to implement innovation and ideas. All right, so I wanted to give a little disclosure because our focus is on online. However, the introduction I'm going to give is more from a face-to-face setting, but you'll see how it can still tie back into online courses. Control your chaos. It's a phrase I've said for at least 20 years now. Preparing for these sessions brings me back a few years to where this phrase came from. Here's a picture here. It's from my first class I ever taught down at Cortland at OCM BOCES, the Adult Education Center. It was a converted conference room into a classroom. We had to, you can notice, you can see the setup was not really conducive, but we made it work. It was when I was a new teacher, given a textbook and a class list, told to teach a brand new program no one had ever taught before in the New York area. And I quickly realized that my work experience, my education, was not going to help me comprehend the curriculum I was about ready to teach. I had two approaches to consider. The first was to fake it, pretend that I knew what was going on and hope for the best. And then the second option was to be real with the adult students. Listen, everyone, this is a brand new program. There are limited resources available to me and to you. Let's work through this together and just know I'm committed to your success. Believe it or not, being real with the students worked out great for the course. My students who excelled in math would meet with me on Tuesdays as we worked through the problems I couldn't figure out in preparation for Wednesday's math session. My memorizers worked with the students who struggled to remember the brand to generic and indications for the top 300 medications. My study until you drop students would go into a separate room on Thursdays to group study, and they did study to get through. When an exam came up and it didn't go as we wanted, we went through the exam question by question and had a class discussion on why the answer was what it was. I was even so flexible that if the students weren't comfortable taking the exam on Friday, they could take it on Monday morning if they wanted. And the reality is the students only took advantage of that once. But I will say they delayed the exam on Fridays until the afternoon a few times. Now I recognize the course could have been a terrible experience, and I only did that out of necessity. Working in a pharmacy for 8 years, not once did I calculate drip rates for IV bags or discuss the bioavailability of a product. But what ended up happening is the students took control of their learning. I served as a guide on the side, something you'll hear others reference for online courses. And of course, as I was more comfortable with the material in the classroom, their learning experience evolved. When I was teaching, my adult students would call the advice I gave them Carrieisms. I had the opportunity to be in front of adult students for 32.5 hours, allowing me to really get to know them and their needs. As a student, as a teacher, now moving to a different location, I recognized many of my students had lost their jobs or were just starting out. Many of them needed help. Many of them didn't need help with learning the curriculum so much. Of course, they needed assistance there, but they needed more help in figuring out how to move forward in life. While I was sure to have boundaries set in place, I did take opportunities in the classroom to share messages that I thought the students needed to hear at that time. For example, during the first 2 weeks of class, we wrote on the top of our papers for those who needed it that I can do it. That was for our math students who were terrified of math. For those who seemed to have family issues, I'd state that our classroom was a safe place, an opportunity to block out the noise. If you want me to hold your phone, I will. You can blame me if you'd like. If that will help you be successful, let me take your phone. This classroom is about you and your success. Block out the noise. So I'm going to stop there, recognizing that only some of this could be applied to online courses, but there are still some takeaways to consider. So thinking about it, in your current course setup, how connected do you feel with your online students? As a parent and educator and someone who advocates for those with mental health, I was particularly interested in the Mind Over Monsters book Selt offered last fall for the reading group. There are things I've seen as a parent and someone who is in tune to her daughter and her friends, and also as my role as being a scoutmaster of a Boy Scout troop that consists of girls. I work with young adults in different capacities, and I've seen many things. Thinking about how this applies to online students, it is worthwhile to mention Compassionate Challenge from Sarah Rose Kavanaugh's book. It's an interesting concept, as there are always talks about trying to make things easier for the student, but this suggests, because they're struggling, but this suggests to challenge the students while giving them the tools to be successful. I remember listening to the podcast that Tea for Teaching with John Kane and Rebecca Mushtar created interviewing Sarah Rose Kavanaugh. This is what she said about Compassionate Challenge. Students clearly need compassion, and I think compassion has to come first. For me, what that looks like is establishing classroom communities and learning environments on campus that are characterized by safety and by a feeling of belongingness. You need to feel safe enough to take risks, and you need to feel that you're supported not just by your instructor, but also by your fellow students and the Student Success Office and all the people that are on campus. But once we've established that grounding and that safe setting, then I think to truly learn and grow, we need to take risks. We do need to step outside of our comfort zones, and we need to be challenged. So I thought those are pretty powerful words that Sarah mentioned in that interview. So what tools would student need to be successful when facing a challenge in your course? The challenge may be as simple or as complex as you may view it. Could just be, how do we get them to pass the course? Does the student have the knowledge and the skills to be successful in doing so? Do they know how to prioritize tasks, effectively study, articulate their words in an essay that will give them the total points? Setting up the conditions to face the challenges is the general idea behind Compassionate Challenge. How would this setup assist in building connections with your online students? Broadly speaking, thinking of within the context of Compassionate Challenge, what do you envision students would want from the college experience as an online learner? I kind of had collected a little list of things that came to mind for me. The students would want their place in the class. They there was conversations about faculty, giving them some permission to make mistakes along the way. That it's okay that they don't come out of the door perfect, doing exceptionally well within the course. Students are missing important relationships in life. And then also, like, they want to, it's all about being valued as a student and also trust in who is teaching you. So, the importance of being human, what does that mean? Humanizing your course. Theresa came across this excellent infographic I'd like to share with you. Give me just a moment. All right, so this infographic will be available, whoops, I apologize. This infographic will be available to anyone and everyone once we complete the summary paper that we're going to be providing. But in this here, you can talk about the importance of humanizing. And this paragraph that I thought was interesting, humanizing leverages learning science and cultural responsive teaching to create an inclusive, equitable online class climate for today's diverse students. When you teach online, it's easy to relate to your students simply as names on the screen. But your students are so much more than that. They are capable, resilient humans who bring an array of perspectives and knowledge to your class. They also bring life experiences shaped by racism, poverty, and social marginalization. In humanized online courses, positive instructor-student relationships are prioritized and serve as the connective tissue between students' engagement and rigor. In any learning modality, human connection is the antidote for the emotional disruption that prevents many students from performing to their full potential, and in online courses creates that connection is even more important. Creating that connection is even more important. So you'll notice along in here, it talks a lot about trust and presence and awareness and empathy and the importance of getting this started very early in the semester. And then the next things I have on a slide, so I'll share that. Okay, so the rest of that infographic was talking about the elements used to humanize your course. It talked about the idea, the liquid syllabus, just stating that you'll be a partner in their learning, a humanized homepage, letting students know that they're welcome here, getting to know you survey to let them know that you're there to support them, warm, wise feedback. It's telling them that I believe in you and you can do this and I'm here to help you through. Self-affirming icebreakers, your values and experience matter here. The wisdom wall, learning is a process of growth. A bumper video, I'm here to help you learn these difficult concepts. And micro lectures, I'm here to help you learn. So one of the things that we talk about is that we are all different, and recognizing those differences and determining how they can add value to the class will help build connections. So being intentional about being inclusive will help build connections with students. I was once at a conference where there's an activity arranged. We each took a personality test, and depending on how many points we had in each column is where we were grouped. The concept was simple: plan a party. What happened was actually really interesting. This conference was for career and technical educators, so we were all educators. The leaders had an elaborate, perfect Okay, so the first group was the leaders. They had an elaborate, perfect plan, but they fought over who was going to do the actual work. The on the whim group, I renamed these just so that they give more context. That group planned the perfect party for later that night in someone else's backyard. The followers decided to plan a party at a restaurant. That was easy enough. And the daily grind decided to plan a birthday party during lunch while at work. One person would bring the plates, another person would buy the cake. What ended up happening was that we determined that we need each of those types of people in a work environment in order to get anything done. We need a leader that can direct us to what needs to be done. We need somebody who can work on the fly. And then we need the followers in the daily grind because they are actually the ones who get a lot of the work done. They're the ones that are dedicated, that rarely take time off, and are dedicated to the cause. When I used this activity in my classroom, it was the context of recognizing each of these roles was important. So I know there are many ways to recognize and value differences, but this was just one that came to mind as I was preparing for this session. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more about the importance of the instructor's voice in your class. That doesn't necessarily mean your speaking voice. It means providing an instructor bio or video or a course introduction for your course. Although a few really polished videos are nice for the course, it's also okay to add ad hoc videos as long as the videos are organized and cohesive. We always share this funny story about a faculty member on campus who was recording a video, and her cat had jumped and made a mess behind her, and you heard this, everything falling, and everyone was just you could hear it on the video, and she kind of turned around and she's like, oh, okay, well, that happened, and she continued on with the lecture. It showed that she was real, and I think that's okay. Just make sure that the video stays focused and isn't just rambling, I guess is what it is. So with the instructor's voice, letting them know that it's okay not to do something well the first time, that this is going to be something that they're going to struggle with at first, but we're here to do this. And when you use instructor's voice, it often reduces confusion for students, and it makes the students more comfortable to possibly reach out to the professor if there are problems that come later on. And I think that the instructor's voice offers hope and possibility with the students. And recognizing when you use instructor's voice, it tends to be a little bit more warm than just maybe the written content that's within the course. And then also part of this is being a resource for your students, letting them know where they can get help in and out of the class for online students. We have some resources available to students on campus, but more often with the online students, they're not aware of them. And the trust piece, that's huge. Students will be more willing to, work with someone that they trust. So if you can improve the two-way communication when you have that trust. And the last one is relevance. And I do want to talk in more detail about that. All right. Theresa, would you like me to cover this one, or do you want to?
We can do it together, so go ahead and start.
Okay. All right. So, today's students, it just seems like there's a lot of questions. They question everything. Why should I take your course? What is this course going to get me? Why am I here? How does this pertain to me? And is this busy work? Thinking about the context of real life work, what can you tell the students to let them know that you're not just making them do this because, you woke up one morning and thought it was a good idea. There's a purpose for having them do this work. Providing classroom context. Now, in online courses, we know that we need to teach, this chapter. We know we've got this activity. We know we have this assessment. Those things get covered pretty well in online courses. But the part that tends to be missing is explaining why. And I kind of have this visualization that if you are in front of a classroom, a face-to-face classroom, and you start handing out, back in the day, you'd hand out a paper telling them about this upcoming assignment. You would provide context and you would explain, I really wanted you to get into this because it, will help you understand A, B, and C, whatever it might be. So in the online course, the components of having the assignment is there, but sometimes the relevance of why that assignment is there is missing. And then the other thing is about making connections. If you're taking a sociology course, if a student is taking a sociology course and they're in the business field, why would they want to take that course? What would sociology do for them in the business field? Okay, and then so this next one is providing relevance. This is just trying to get it onto one screen, but option one is a basic module at a glance. It tells the students what they need to do for chapter one. And then the option two, it provides an inside scoop. And you'll see how it says that reading chapter one, exceptionally important. Without it, you will lack the foundation to understand the next chapter. The PowerPoint will serve as a guide as you read along the chapter. Completing the assignment will get you to recognize the difference between A, B, and C. When you participate in the discussion, I look forward to hearing about your perception of the model you saw in the lecture notes. Finally, doing well on this quiz is the first step to setting yourself up for success in the rest of the course. And I look forward to seeing what you come up with and enjoy the module. So it is giving the instructor voice and also telling them why it's so important to learn these, to work through this module. All right, and now this is Theresa.
So everything that Carrie just talked about had to do with, was part of the pieces that go along with Keller's ARCS model of motivation. And ARCS stands for attention, relevance, confidence, and satisfaction. And so trying to find ways to engage your learners in the content. And again, as Carrie was saying before, helping them find those connections between why they need this and why they need that. So in using the example of a sociology course for a business major, again, thinking of the gen ed requirements and a business student saying, what does this do for me? How does this fit into my world? How does it fit into what I'm studying? And helping them make those connections. And as educators, that's a really important component because they aren't necessarily going to see that. Because you remember our traditional age students, and again, many of them are in our online courses, are still very much adolescents. So we need to think about it from an adolescent learning side. They don't necessarily have that maturity that our older students who are maybe age 26 and above may be able to make those connections more easily. But then again, some of our adult students may not always see the relevance either, because again, they come from a different world in some cases. So the document Carrie has up on the screen was something I actually ran across very recently. And it's a Creative Commons document. And I thought it really did a good job of explaining those different components. But again, thinking of motivation, finding ways to get that student's attention, and how you can hold it throughout the whole lesson, throughout the whole discussion, throughout the whole module. And this is where the relevance component goes. And again, I steal something from Carrie too. Those that know me in the instructional design community know this is my thing. Everything, you need to find that relevance. That relevance is going to help tie things together for your students. It needs to have some meaning to your students. And it's the same in real life too. You know, thinking of it from a generational standpoint, me explaining something to my 18 and 20-year-old grandsons, and and again, thinking of the difference in generations, and they will just look at me and roll the eyes. But then again, if I can find ways to make it relatable to their world, what's important to them in that age group, and understanding learners as a whole, I may be able to better make those connections, whether it is, again, on a personal level or in a classroom or on a professional level. So also thinking about the confidence. Once we feel that something makes sense in the context of what we're doing, and we realize that, oh, I can do this. Oh, this makes sense. I can apply this. This helps build confidence. And that's just one way to do that. And then there's the satisfaction component. That satisfaction can help your students continue to come back for more because they're seeing that, oh, this is applicable. Oh, I can do this. Oh, I feel good about myself in this whole learning process. One of the really nice things about this document is it talks about the subcategories within each of these larger components, which this was not something I have ever seen put out like this. I'm sure it has been, but most of the materials I've looked at actually have been, Keller's actual writings and other writings with Keller or based on his work. So it talks about how some different ways, and right here to help with the attention, finding those real world examples, building that relevant, which goes right in to building the relevance. And this is the big thing, I think, too, the perceived worth. Why is this content important? So again, a lot of it goes back to everything Carrie has been saying pertaining to this whole idea of relevance. So I hope that this document can be really helpful. And if you have other questions pertaining to how you might utilize this model and this framework in your own courses, all you have to do is reach out to the instructional design team.
Okay. All right, going back into our slides. All right, so, just thinking about this, some of this already instilled into your course. Can you think of ways that you may want to make updates to improve your course? Now, I know you've been waiting for this part of the presentation. In these sessions, I wanted to focus about all you have to gain as faculty by investing in your course to make better connections. And here's what the team came up with as we were talking through. Everybody wants to be a part of something. So if you genuinely feel like you're a part of this, you may get, in some satisfaction out of that. Being part of the team, working through to get through this together, could build, some decent connections. When there's trust, there's a door open to being vulnerable. So my thought process with that is I've worked with some courses that talked about very sensitive topics. So if you can build that trust with the students and the trust with students to students where they trust each other, you can have some really controversial conversations, uh, and have it work out when that trust is there. And then, enjoyment and fun. Some of the solutions could bring additional enjoyment to the course, making it more fun for you to teach. And there's a little bit about playing, and I'm going to explain those innovation and ideas in just a minute. But if the students are comfortable with reaching out to you, it's likely to avoid problems for you down the road. And also possible that there might be some canned responses that can be reused that are set up in a positive manner to help with the email problems that come along the way. So, it's this one's a little bit difficult because making connections with the students is really important for the students, but you really do, as a faculty member, you get to gain in this process too. Oops. All right, so innovation and ideas. So there's I have a few slides, and it's a getting to know you activity. And what it was doing is asking different types of questions that maybe different than typical getting to know you questions. An example might be when do the students complete their coursework? So maybe some of them are early morning workers, or some rely solely on the weekends. So there's some getting to know you activities that I'd be happy to share out in setting the students up so that they can make some connections on day one with other students within the course, to help them through. It's possible about checking in with them through memes was an idea, just a random midpoint check-in, like how are you feeling this week with your coursework, and letting them reply back to how they're feeling. Of course, you'll have to set some parameters for it, but it's an informal way to get an inside scoop to how they're doing at that time. Offer reassurance in the assignment details. I think that's really important. Recognize that, hey, don't underestimate this assignment. It's really important, but it's going to take you a lot longer than you think it's going to, so plan ahead for that stuff. One of the things I used to implement was a quick question before an exam opened up on what their confidence was before they started the exam, just a 1 through 10. How did they feel about going into this exam? And then also the last question was how they felt after taking the exam. And I think that builds confidence. It's really simple to implement, but it does build confidence with the students. And then there's testing student confidence. Okay. Geek alert. I identified a geek as a person who is knowledgeable and about and obsessively interested in a particular subject. And so sharing something cool. So if there's a current event that's out, or you've gone someplace that would be really interesting for students to see, you could share that. I remember one of them, it was an art history class where the faculty member had taken a short video about where they were, some building that was of interest to the students. So sharing that with them, because it shows that you're thinking about them outside of the classroom. And then encouraging participation and engage conversations with the students, letting them know it's okay to use your voice and that you encourage them to use their voice in the class, and voice be written for online. All right, so in finishing this up, I do want to make mention again about Oscar and what it is. It is a way to evaluate your online course to determine if it is set up for student success. We have a version of it that Theresa has created, and we do have that available to you. And it's a great resource to just kind of see if you're checking the boxes, or that your course is ready and will better meet the needs of the students. We also have our Innovation and Ideas website. This is something that's relatively new, and we are continually adding to it, but that is available at oswego.edu / innovations -ideas. And in there, you'll also find out different ways that we can support you, because there's a lot of different things we can offer. For Bright Space support, we have the help and support Zoom office hours that runs Mondays from 1 to 3, Wednesday from 10 to 12, and Thursday 1 to 3. And in closing, there's so many ways to connect with your students within your course. It's just a matter of, being intentional with that and making sure that, you're doing your best to make them feel like they're a part of something. And in turn, by making them feel like they're a part of something, you get to be a part of something too. All right, and that is the end of the presentation. Thank you so much.